Henry VIII's marriage to Anne of Cleves began with high hopes, largely based on a portrait of her that Henry saw before they met in person. The painting, created by court artist Hans Holbein the Younger, depicted and in an appealing light, which quickly caught the king's attention. At this point in his life, Henry was looking for a new wife after the death of his third queen, Jane Seymour. The political context was also a significant factor in his decision, as marrying a German noblewoman would secure a crucial alliance with the Protestant German states, which Henry viewed as important for strengthening his position against Catholic powers like France and Spain. However, when Anne of Cleves arrived in England to meet Henry in 1540, their first encounter did not go as the king had expected. Upon seeing her in person, Henry was reportedly shocked and disappointed by her appearance. Historical accounts suggest that he found her looks unattractive and claimed that she did not resemble the flattering portrait that had been painted. According to some sources, Henry even went so far as to say that Anne looked nothing so fair as she hath been reported. This initial disappointment set the tone for their relationship. Henry quickly began voicing his dissatisfaction, which extended beyond physical attraction. The chemistry and connection that he hoped for were absent, leaving the king frustrated. Despite these feelings, the marriage plans had progressed too far to be called off without causing diplomatic complications, so Henry reluctantly went through with the wedding. Unfortunately, the marriage was short-lived, and Henry sought an annulment just 6 months later, citing a lack of consummation and other reasons. Anne's role as Henry's fourth wife became infamous, remembered as the rejected queen, due to Henry's personal disappointment and his public dissatisfaction with their union. Anne of Cleves came from a prominent Protestant family, which significantly shaped her upbringing and later attracted the attention of Henry VIII. Her father, John, Duke of Cleves, was a key figure in the Protestant Reformation and openly defied the Catholic Church, including the Pope and Catholic monarchs across Europe. As a result, Anne and her siblings were raised in a liberal and progressive environment for their time, encouraged to think independently and form their own opinions. This upbringing was quite different from the more conservative Catholic households of many other noble families in Europe. For Anne, growing up in such a household meant that she was exposed to ideas of religious reform and intellectual discourse, which was uncommon for many women of her status. Her close relationship with her mother, Maria of Jülichburg, further reinforced these values. Anne's family life was very female-centric, with her mother playing a prominent role in her upbringing and education. This environment was a source of comfort and security for Anne, and it shaped her perspective on life and marriage. At the same time, Henry VIII, who had broken with the Catholic Church after his divorce from Catherine of Aragon, was on the lookout for allies within the Protestant world. The idea of marrying Anne of Cleves presented a political advantage for Henry, as it would help solidify an alliance with the German Protestant states. Given her Protestant background and her father's defiance of Catholicism, Anne seemed like a suitable candidate for Henry's fourth wife. However, despite these political and religious motivations, Anne did not show the enthusiasm or romantic interest that Henry had hoped for during their courtship. This lack of initial excitement on her part, along with her strong attachment to her family, contributed to this strained relationship that would later characterize their brief marriage. Anne of Cleves' family, particularly her mother, was deeply involved in the discussions surrounding her potential marriage to Henry VIII, and they were not enthusiastic about the union. Anne was extremely close to her mother, Maria of Jülichburg, who played a significant role in her upbringing and held a protective stance over her daughter. Their household, centered around female influence and nurturing, provided Anne with a strong sense of security, which made her hesitant about leaving her family for a foreign court, especially one with a notorious reputation like that of Henry VIII. When Henry began to court Anne, it was not simply a romantic or personal endeavor. The marriage was largely political, aimed at strengthening alliances with Protestant powers in Europe. Henry's break from the Catholic Church made him eager to secure ties with other Protestant leaders, and Anne's father, Duke John of Cleves, was an ideal candidate for such an alliance. However, Anne's family, particularly her mother, viewed the marriage with apprehension. They were aware of Henry's notorious reputation, especially regarding his previous marriages, and likely had concerns about Anne's future in the unpredictable and sometimes dangerous English court. Anne's mother tried to delay or even prevent the marriage, hoping to protect her daughter from becoming entangled with Henry. Furthermore, it is believed that Anne herself was not overly enthusiastic about marrying Henry. She was content with her life in Cleves and maintained a strong connection with her family, which made the prospect of moving to England and marrying a much older king less appealing. Adding to the complexity, Henry had also considered marrying Anne's younger sister, Amalia of Cleves. He viewed both sisters as potential brides, and at one point, Henry sent his court painter to capture the likeness of both women to help him decide. Ultimately, however, the choice fell on Anne, despite her family's reservations. When Henry VIII decided to marry Anne of Cleves, he relied heavily on portraits to make his choice, as was customary in arranged royal marriages. He sent Hans Holbein the Younger, one of his court's most renowned painters, to Cleves with a specific mission: paint accurate portraits of both Anne and her younger sister, Amalia, so he could decide which of the two women he would marry. At the time, Henry had not yet met Anne or her sister in person and wanted a visual representation to aid his decision. Holbein was given strict instructions by Henry not to flatter the women in the portraits. The king, known for his vanity and desire for beauty, wanted a queen who met his aesthetic standards and insisted that the painter provide an honest depiction. However, Holbein faced an immediate challenge due to the cultural customs of a Cleves court. In accordance with German modesty traditions, Anne and her sister typically covered their faces with veils, making it difficult for Holbein to capture their likeness. Holbein had to work hard to gain the trust of the two sisters, eventually convincing them to reveal their faces so he could paint them. The resulting portrait of Anne showed her as attractive, modest, and suitable for Henry's court. Satisfied with Holbein's work, Henry chose Anne over Amalia, though many historians believe the decision was driven more by political considerations, and, as the elder daughter, had greater hereditary rights and brought more political value. However, the reality of Anne's appearance did not match Henry's expectations when they finally met in person. This discrepancy would later be used as part of the narrative explaining Henry's disappointment and discontent with Anne, fueling rumors that the painter had been overly flattering in his portrayal, despite the king's clear instructions. This marked the beginning of a strained and uncomfortable relationship between the king and his new bride. When Henry VIII finally met Anne of Cleves in person, his reaction was far from the romantic or enthusiastic one expected. Despite having chosen her based on the portrait painted by Hans Holbein, Henry was immediately dissatisfied with Anne's appearance. According to historical accounts, Henry was so displeased that he openly criticized her looks, claiming she did not live up to the image he had seen in the portrait. His disappointment was swift, and he began to voice his dissatisfaction to his courtiers almost immediately after their first encounter. Henry reportedly said that Anne was nothing so fair as she hath been reported, expressing his displeasure with both her appearance and the painter who had depicted her. He did not stop at blaming the artist, though. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister, who had strongly supported the marriage for political reasons, also faced the king's wrath. Cromwell had promoted the union with Anne, emphasizing her beauty and the political advantages it would bring. Henry, feeling betrayed and disappointed, held both Holbein and Cromwell responsible for his unfortunate choice. Despite Henry's negative reaction, the wedding plans had already progressed too far to be called off without causing serious political repercussions. The marriage was a strategic alliance designed to strengthen ties with Protestant German states, and calling it off could have jeopardized those relationships. Therefore, Henry reluctantly went ahead with the marriage in January 1540, even though he had made it clear to those around him that he was deeply unhappy with his new bride. This early disappointment set the tone for their brief and troubled marriage. From the beginning, Henry was cold and distant toward Anne, and his initial displeasure with her appearance would later be one of the reasons he sought an annulment. Henry VIII's dissatisfaction with Anne of Cleves didn't end with their wedding. In fact, things worsened after the ceremony. Despite their marriage being an important political alliance, Henry's personal disappointment with Anne remained strong, and it became evident on their wedding night. The marriage was expected to be consummated, as was custom, but the morning after, Henry complained that he found Anne even less appealing after their first night together. He reportedly remarked, "I liked her before not well, but now I like her much worse." The failure of the marriage to be consummated was a significant issue. While Anne was young and relatively inexperienced, it wasn't simply her lack of physical intimacy that displeased Henry. He accused her of having evil smells and found her overall unattractive in both appearance and demeanor. These complaints reinforced Henry's already growing desire to end the marriage as quickly as possible. To extricate himself from the union, Henry and his counselors came up with a plan to annul the marriage. They focused on Anne's prior betrothal to Francis of Lorraine when she was just 11 years old, claiming that the earlier engagement made her ineligible to marry Henry. Although the betrothal had been dissolved, Henry used this as grounds to argue that the marriage should never have taken place. At the same time, Henry was eager to avoid any suggestion that he was impotent or incapable of consummating the marriage. To defend his virility, he had a physician testify that Henry had experienced 2 nocturnal pollutions, wet dreams, while sleeping beside Anne, implying his sexual health was not in question. This peculiar and public defense of his masculinity only added to the spectacle surrounding their brief and troubled marriage. Eventually, the marriage was annulled after just 6 months, leaving Anne relieved but with her reputation tied to Henry's public rejection. After their marriage was annulled in July 1540, Anne of Cleves' relationship with Henry VIII surprisingly remained amicable. Unlike some of Henry's other wives who met tragic fates, Anne was fortunate to escape with both her life and a favorable settlement. Following the annulment, Henry granted her a generous severance package, including estates, manors, and a substantial income, allowing her to live independently. She was also given the title of the king's beloved sister, which placed her just below the queen and Henry's daughters in terms of royal precedence. This title helped Anne retain a high social status in the English court, despite the dissolution of her marriage. Anne's post-annulment life was marked by her ability to navigate the complexities of court life and maintain a good relationship with Henry and his children. She was clever and diplomatic, ensuring she stayed on good terms with the king. In 1541, Anne even gifted Henry and his new wife, Catherine Howard, 2 fine horses as a gesture of goodwill, which demonstrated her ability to rise above personal grievances and remain connected to the royal family. And also built close relationships with Henry's children. She became particularly close to the future Queen Mary I, and her friendship with Henry's other children, including Elizabeth I and Edward VI, further secured her standing at court. Anne's attention to these relationships paid off, as it allowed her to continue living in comfort and safety after Henry's death. Anne's life after the annulment was relatively peaceful compared to the turmoil she had experienced during her brief marriage. She lived a quiet, dignified life, mostly away from the public eye, and remained in England, her adopted country. Anne's ability to maintain favor with the royal family, even after the marriage ended, ensured that she lived the rest of her days in relative comfort and security. Anne of Cleves managed to secure a relatively peaceful and privileged life after her annulment from Henry VIII, but her time in the English court was not without controversy. Despite her amicable relationship with the king and his children, rumors and scandals continued to follow her. One of the most infamous rumors surfaced in 1541 when whispers spread through the court that Anne had secretly given birth to a child. This scandalous rumor even suggested that the child might have been fathered by Henry himself, implying that Anne and the king had, in fact, consummated their marriage, contrary to what had been claimed during the annulment process. Though the rumor was likely false, it gained enough traction to prompt an investigation by the crown. Henry's court took the matter seriously enough to detain 2 individuals who were believed to have started the gossip. The allegations were ultimately dismissed, and the scandal quickly faded, but it demonstrated how Anne remained a figure of intrigue and speculation even after her time as queen had ended. The fact that people believed she could have had a secret child with the king shows how connected Anne remained to Henry's legacy and how closely she was still associated with the royal family, despite their annulment. in the same year and found herself once again involved in court drama when Henry's fifth wife, Catherine Howard, was accused of adultery and sentenced to execution. Despite her previous gestures of goodwill toward Catherine, Anne remained close to Henry and was rumored to have harbored hopes of reconciling with him and becoming his wife again. Some historians believe that after Catherine's execution, Anne may have seen an opportunity to remarry Henry, but those hopes were dashed when Henry quickly married Catherine Parr as his sixth wife. Nevertheless, Anne's reputation remained largely untarnished, and she continued to live comfortably in England, far from the political and romantic upheavals that had characterized her brief marriage to Henry VIII. Anne of Cleves, despite her brief and unsuccessful marriage to Henry VIII, managed to live out the rest of her life in relative peace and comfort. One of the key reasons for her secure position after the annulment was her ability to maintain close relationships with Henry's children, especially Queen Mary I. These connections were crucial for Anne, as they allowed her to remain in the good graces of the English court and continue enjoying royal favor. Her attention to building relationships with the king's heirs ensured that she was never completely sidelined, even after her time as queen had ended. Anne was particularly close to Mary I, and this friendship proved advantageous in her later years. After Henry's death in 1547, Anne's strong bond with Mary ensured her a place of importance at court. It is believed that Anne even attended Queen Mary's coronation in 1553, a testament to the strength of their friendship. Mary, known for her loyalty to those who had supported her during difficult times, rewarded Anne with continued favor, allowing her to live comfortably in retirement. Anne's later life was marked by her shrewdness in navigating the often treacherous waters of court politics. Despite being a foreign-born princess and a former queen, she managed to avoid the fates of some of Henry's other wives, such as Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, who were executed. Instead, Anne skillfully cultivated relationships with Henry's children, which allowed her to stay in favor long after the king had passed. In her final years, Anne lived away from the public eye, residing on her estates and enjoying the wealth and privileges granted to her by Henry. She spent her time in quiet retirement, far removed from the royal court scandals and intrigues. When Anne died in 1557 at the age of 41, she left behind a legacy of survival and resilience, having outlived Henry VIII and all of his other wives except for Catherine Parr. Despite the brevity of her queenship, Anne's later life was a testament to her intelligence, diplomacy, and ability to thrive in a politically dangerous environment. Anne of Cleves holds a unique place in the history of Henry VIII's wives, not only as the one who survived their marriage unscathed, but also as the only wife to be buried in Westminster Abbey, the prestigious resting place of British royalty. Despite her marriage to Henry being annulled after just 6 months, her grave is inscribed with the title, Anne of Cleves, Queen of England, a nod to the brief period when she was Henry's fourth wife. This final tribute reflects both the significance of her royal status and the complex relationship she maintained with Henry and his court even after their marriage ended. Anne's legacy as Henry's rejected queen has been debated by historians for centuries. While popular narratives often focus on Henry's disappointment with Anne's appearance, modern scholars suggest that the rejection might have been less about her looks and more about their awkward initial encounter. On New Year's Day 1540, shortly before their marriage, Henry, in disguise, approached Anne for a surprise introduction. Expecting a romantic connection, Henry hoped Anne would recognize him despite his costume. However, Anne, who had never seen Henry before, either ignored him or reacted with alarm, not realizing that the stranger was her future husband. This embarrassing moment is believed by some historians to have sealed Anne's fate, as Henry, feeling slighted and humiliated, may have decided that she was not the wife he wanted. Although their marriage ended quickly and outlived Henry and all of his other wives except Catherine Parr, she continued to live in England after the annulment, enjoying a comfortable and privileged life. Henry treated her with remarkable generosity for a former wife, granting her wealth, estates, and a respected place in the court's hierarchy as the king's beloved sister. Her ability to maintain good relations with the royal family, particularly Henry's children, allowed her to thrive even after her queenship ended. Anne of Cleves' survival, both literally and figuratively, is a testament to her intelligence, diplomacy, and ability to navigate the dangerous political waters of Tudor England. Despite the challenges she faced, she remains a symbol of resilience among Henry VIII's wives, remembered not only for her brief time as queen but also for the life she built afterward.